This is Singularity, a sacred scripture study. You are listening to episode 20. Today we are covering part 3 of chapter 4 in A Course in Miracles. I am Angie, your host of Singularity, a podcast where we're not afraid to ask the questions that lead us to our truth. Each season we'll be discussing our way through a different sacred or inspired text. Join us with Season 1 as we find our truths in A Course in Miracles, the advent or beginning of a great awakening. And just as the Course itself will tell you, this is but one version of the universal curriculum. There are many others. This one only differing in form. They all lead to God in the end. So go ahead and grab your coffee, have your pen and paper handy, and the text if you haven't. Don't forget, a free version is available online at acourseinmiraclesnow.com. Now the journey in discovering our truths starts right now. Here we go. Welcome back, Miracle Makers. I'm glad you're taking this time for yourself today, and I'm thankful that you're sharing it with me. Now in this episode, we are uncovering chapter 3, part 4, Error and Ego. This part of the chapter reveals to us the steps that lead us from spirit to this world of misperception. We talk about where we all went wrong-minded and how. Listen in, because Jesus talks directly to us through the text and tells us how he did it while he was in the body and how he wants to help us do the same. Paragraph 1, Spirit. At this moment, what we think we are capable of pales in comparison to our actual power. We're constantly questioning and doubting everything we do, from what time we should wake up or what time we should go to bed, what types of foods we should put in our body, just to name a few. And since we're always doubting how we do things or how we go about our day, these distractions make it impossible for us to realize our knowing. Another reason why it's impossible for us to realize our knowing is because we are stuck perceiving from the outside in, assuming everything we do or feel is a direct result of the world around us. Meaning we think the outside world determines our responses. So now our actions are based solely on what's going on around us instead of searching within for our own inner knowing. We are so quick sometimes to do things based on a general format set in place by someone else that it worked for, and maybe many others have followed the same format and ended up with great results too. So to get these same results, we follow their formula before we even check within to see how it aligns with our inner knowing. When really it only worked for the person having the original experience and result because they probably followed their inner knowing. And everyone else succeeded not because of the formula, but because for some reason in their minds, they made a choice, stuck with it, and decided that this was going to work for them. So it did. Okay, we are going to shift gears here a smidge, and I'm going to ask for you to get into a disciplined mindset or a mathematical mindset with me here. So stay with me. It's mind-blowing, really. Perception was made possible at the separation because when the Spirit of God moved or expanded on the surface of matter or the face of the earth, the movement and matter together took form. This form gave the illusion of distance and space, making levels possible to perceive. And depending on where awareness places itself within the space and time, many different perceptions are possible. Spirit or consciousness existed within the void or nothingness. There was no physical body or mind, just spirit, and that's it. However, before spirit expanded itself within the nothingness, none of these things were even possible. But when spirit expanded itself, it spread its consciousness all around itself as far as it could without moving, making a sphere around itself. Now, with this awareness all around itself, spirit moves to the very edge of the sphere, anywhere, and repeats what it did the first time. Now, spirit has no choice but to do it again. Spirit is flawless, so it will move flawlessly, creating another sphere exactly one radius away from the sphere next to it. Every time spirit moves to another sphere, the overlapping creates a more detailed form. And within the lines, surfaces, and angles created by form, light is able to be reflected and received. But spirit has no form, only perfect movement. This perfect movement could be looked at as a mathematical equation like the phi ratio, for example, where the movement within the math is set or unchanging within this pattern. So there are no other possible perspectives to confuse within this set pattern. Also, 3 spheres exactly 1 radius apart from each other form the symbol for the Holy Trinity. And the Course tells us that the 3 spheres of the Holy Trinity are the only levels capable of unity. This initial movement where the 2 spheres overlapped formed light. Now, there is so much more to say here about this. For example, the shape formed at this overlap where light was made possible, interestingly enough, is in the shape of an eye. Also, the first movement correlates with the first day of creation when light was created. But I'm certain the Course will open up the door for us to talk about more of this down the road a bit more. So for now, what sentence 8 is telling us is within this intelligent awareness is order. And order says for every action there is an equal but opposite reaction. So to say it simply, as the Course has, because there is light, there is darkness. This is only because they are complete opposites of each other. Opposites meaning one exists only where the other doesn't. Paragraph 2. Consciousness. Consciousness is when the awareness focused around a form within the space and time begins to identify only as the perceiver instead of the awareness as a whole. For example, our hands make it possible for our minds to experience a perception the mind otherwise wouldn't be able to. And let's say that one day we focus all of our awareness to just our pointer finger on our right hand. And we get so wrapped up into only experiencing perception from this finger, it's all we know and think we are. This example is similar to what's happening with us here now. I want to directly quote the Course here because it is said so clearly. Sentence 1. Consciousness, the level of perception, was the first split introduced into the mind after the separation, making the mind a perceiver rather than a creator. The Course is telling us consciousness is the realm of the ego. I imagine it like this for us. On the radio, we hear a song that gets us excited, but as we continue driving further from the broadcasting station, our antenna struggles to keep a connection. The static frequency interrupts our song, so we turn the dial to adjust our frequency so we can hear every bit of our song. Well, it's a similar concept here. The further awareness expands out from itself, the more easily static or ego can interrupt our signal from source. In an atom, the further an electron orbits from the nucleus, the more unstable it becomes. Spiritually, we talk about an internal pulling or conviction. It's interesting for me to correlate it to science and relate that pulling as a literal pull, either gravitational or magnetic, just like an electron to the nucleus of an atom. So an atom would be a smaller diagram of this within us, and the universe a very similar diagram of this beyond us. I kind of went on a rabbit trail here, but to sum up the second sentence, the further we think we are from source, the more unstable our connection becomes. The key is remembering there is no distance because we are source. So everything we think we are lacking or needing to be stable is all there within us. Otherwise, when we forget this, it's really easy for us to feel a separation and become unaware of our wholeness, and instead identify more as an individual consciousness within the space and time we perceive around us. And this is where ego thrives. As awareness expands both in and out from itself, the message of true will must remain stable, because if it's unstable, ego is able to inject a will of its own. Knowing is stability, certainty is strength, and in knowing, we can only see ourselves as who we truly are, because who we truly are is certain. Anything outside of knowing is uncertain. Paragraph 3. Ego. The ego is the part of the mind that questions. It was made, not created, when we believed ourselves separate from God. The ego is able to ask questions, but is incapable of knowing or understanding the answers. This is because the ego seeks answers from the outside in through perception. It is incapable of knowing because knowledge is not perceived. For us to believe we were separate, ego had to tell our minds a different story. We had to edge God out. And when we did this, ego was made, not created. The new story ego is telling us is one of separateness and duality, confusing our mind. By shifting our belief power or creative power toward this new story, ego can use us to make a world it can continue to exist in. Ego keeps us confused, asking questions, so we continue to search outside ourselves for the answers, forgetting the answers are already within us. This is necessary for the illusion to work. Our minds must remain unsure of who we are. Being in this state takes us out of alignment with who we truly are, and because of this, we experience uncertainty and conflict. In this state, we forget our connection to everything, making us feel isolated, and now everything we felt connected to is strange to us. And this is where the fear-based thoughts come in. When we think these bodies are ours, that I am me and I am what makes me me, we now fear the thought of losing it or lacking it. And this initiates a reaction in us to defend and protect what is ours. It's no wonder we are so afraid. This is why, in order for us to get out of the fear-based thoughts, is to know that we are not these bodies. We made these bodies to wall ourselves off to feel like an individual. But we did not create who we already were. That part of us is eternal and is an extension of God. It's not ours, or yours, or theirs. It never has been and never could be. This applies to all of God's creation, including the earth we live on. The Course tells us the good news here is our misperceptions, or what we make instead of create, can never be made real, and what we create is impossible of being affected by our error. This is why, ultimately, we choose to heal the separation. Paragraph 4. The mind. Being in the right mind is not exactly the same as knowing. Right-mindedness is being in a state of mind that allows for us to begin perceiving clearly. Knowing is knowing. Outside of that, there is right-minded, wrong-minded, and everything in between. So who knows who's going to perceive what and how, leaving us with way too much leeway for the wrong way. It's clear knowing isn't involved. Right-minded is a state of mind making us capable of perceiving correctly and is only termed to mean the opposite of wrong-minded. And actually, it could really be called miracle-minded because what's really happening is it's healing our misperceptions. Paragraph 5. Perception. Each possible perception is made through many variations of experience, environment, and mindset. So the information received by the mind from the perception is uncertain, meaning depending on a combination of how the information was perceived, could take on a whole new meaning for one and a completely different one for another. Within time and space, perception is able to be experienced differently because even the same person can perceive the same thing at a different time, but the mind received different information depending on the environment and the mindset. Our minds never stop. When our mind made the choice to believe itself separate, it started to perceive from the outside in. When the mind is whole, however, its intention is focused on knowing. Outside of this focused intention, the mind is easily influenced and changed. The only way out is to practice having a clearer perception, because the true nature of the mind is wholeness and intentional knowing. It's always pulling our awareness inward toward our knowing. This is how we align ourselves with spirit, which automatically changes our perception. So when the mind decides it is the body, it steps into the levels of the body instead of the wholeness of spirit. However, the mind has never and could never separate from spirit because it is from spirit. The mind only makes and creates. It cannot undo. And even if we were using our mind within the body levels to make body level things, we can't help but placing the fingerprint of our source on everything we make, because anything made, even within these levels, without love or intention behind them, are only temporary. The mind is a specific point of spirit, and spirit is an expansion of God or source, and source is eternal. Paragraph 6. The body. The mind uses the body as a tool to perceive, because in order for us to perceive something physical, we must do it physically. Perception is the movement of information from the outside to the inside through the physical body. The information is then picked up by the mind and interpreted. Knowledge, however, rises from within us, received complete and whole in understanding by the mind. Using perception as a tool to process the physical information, the mind uses this info to believe and experience the body as who we are. This physical world and the information it represents is uncertain, meaning our bodies are a part of that uncertainty. But spirit knows the truth and knowing is certain. This is why spirit cannot coexist within our bodies or this physical world. Our mind struggles connecting to spirit because it's so distracted and distorted by these perceptions of the physical. And for this reason, no matter how hard we try to access spirit from these bodies, we can't. Ego sees spirit as a threat, continuing to distract and confuse us because ego is a lie or not real and spirit is truth. And once we connect with spirit, our truth, ego is out. Truth will always work this way. When we remember a truth, any question or uncertainty we had will be gone. Well, how do we get our hands on this truth? What do we need to do? Well, the Course tells us to do nothing because truth doesn't require any action, just the choice to stop and be aware of the silence and the stopping. And in this, we'll hear our truths. Maya Angelou said a very similar thing. She said, "Listen to yourself, and in that quietude, you might hear the voice of God." Truth may feel like a physical attack, but truth can't attack. What feels like the attack is our ego being shattered when our knowing starts to rise to the surface of our mind, affirming that unlike the ego, knowledge can never be forgotten or destroyed. Paragraph 7. Misperception. God and His creations live in truth. And no, within true reality, miscreations cannot exist. When we are wanting something, we are believing we lack it. And the truth is, we already have everything we need and lack nothing. Jesus tells us in sentence 3, while as a man he remembered spirit and its knowledge. But instead of trying to balance out error with knowledge, he used it to correct it from its source. He did this by showing how the body was powerless and the power was in the mind. Uniting our will with the will of our creators, we automatically remember spirit and our real purpose. This is exactly what Jesus did while a man, and this is what he's telling us we can do to be able to do the same. We have to be the ones who decide to unite our will with God's will for us. But Jesus says he can erase all the misperceptions from our mind if we will ask for him to guide us through the clearing of our mind. At this point, the only thing standing in our way is our own misperceptions. And if we clear our misperceptions, we will perceive clearly, because clear perception means clearer choosing. Jesus tells us we'll do the choosing, but he can help us choose and recognize what is right for us. The Course says many are called, but few are chosen. Should actually be said as all are called, but few choose to listen. And because of this, they do not choose correctly. The text tells us the chosen ones is just referring to the ones that have chosen correctly so far. When we clear our minds and choose to align our wills with our Creator's will, and then co-create from love, our souls will rest easy in the peace of certainty. That wraps up this episode. The thoughts I share in each podcast are my best interpretation of what resonated as truth for me. I love to share them with you. My intention is to evoke your own thoughts that will make rise within your awareness your own truth. Thank you for being a part of my journey and for allowing me to be a part of yours. With your coffee still warm and your notes fresh, take some time to go inward. Align yourself daily with your truth and take it with you into every experience. And until next time, keep shining.